It's a special group, and every time I come, I always learn something new because you not only listen, you also engage. And again, if there are any questions you might have, any comments, please don't hesitate. So I guess based on the time of the year, obviously Rosh HaShanah is a theme, but it's really not just Rosh HaShanah. I mean, Elul is a time to sort of really, get back to basics. And I think that there's a pasuk in the beginning of the Rabbeinu Bechai's introduction to Kiseitze, the parsha that we just read. Rabbeinu Bechai, one of the great Rishonim, great commentaries on Chumash, and every one of his introductions, he quotes a pasuk in Mishlei. And for this particular parsha, he quotes, and again, we're talking about literally just 2 weeks away from Rosh Hashanah, Tana b'ni libchali. Tana b'ni libchali. That's the pasuk that he quotes from Shlomo Melech, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to the Jewish people a very fundamental point. And one, as simple as it seems, I think it could be very elusive. I think it's something that we don't always talk about, because generally when it comes to orthodoxy and it comes to Torah observance, we are very often caught up in details. And details are definitely important. But before you get to the details, before you can really be sort of so sensitively concerned about making sure every mitzvah is right, there really should be a reason why you're concerned that every mitzvah is right. And the pasuk he quotes is, Tana b'ni libchali, my son or my daughter, give me your heart. Give me your heart. And this is a common theme that Rabbeinu Bechai talks about throughout Chumash, is that first and foremost, and this is certainly, Elul is a time that I think we can sort of capitalize on the atmospheric conditions that exist between us and God, where God is sort of really begging us to get close, begging us to connect to Him, is, where's your heart? And I want you to give it to me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, God says to us, I want your heart. And when we stop and think about it, and it's one of the more memorable moments, you don't really remember, at least I don't remember that many things I hear at a funeral. You go to a funeral, you hear their spadim, you get moved, and you sort of move on in life. But for some reason, this particular levaya, and unfortunately, we chance to go to too many. This happened years ago. This is not a recent funeral, and this happened some years ago. And a fellow was eulogizing his wife, and there was a terrible loss. She was an incredible lady, but he said something very profound that really hit me. And he said that during this process, and she was fighting cancer, he says, this process forced me to really look in the mirror and ask myself a fundamental question. What do you really want? What do you really want? And it just sort of hit me like, oh, what do you mean? Of course don't we all want the same thing? Don't we all want to be good Jews? Don't we all want to get closer to God? Don't we want to just sort of, do what we're supposed to be doing? And of course we all want to. But the real question, and that Shlomo Melech is sort of bringing up in terms of this pasuk in Mishlei, is that first and foremost, for our service to really be significant, our fundamental first position needs to be our heart, our focus. The real team that we're working for has got to be God's team. It's got to be God. It's got to be our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's probably not that easy of a thing, because there's so many things that get in the way, so many important things we have going on in our lives. We got jobs, we got relationships, we have different types of commitments, and how much time do we have for God? But Hashem is saying to us, I know you have those commitments, and I'm not asking you to go off in some place full of mountains and just meditate for the rest of your life. But you have to sort of get to your core and say, what's really important to me? And the answer needs to be, and certainly at this time of the year, we have to find a way of sort of coming to grips with the reality that what's really important for us is to be close to Hashem, to be close to God, to develop a relationship with Hashem. And that can sometimes be elusive. And this is not to say let's not focus on the details. It's not to say that every mitzvah is not critical. But if we're doing mitzvot, if we're just doing the actions in a vacuum, and our heart's not in it, and we're not feeling that there is something deeper going on here in terms of my wanting to please HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my feelings about my love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we're missing something, and something is really we're falling short. And the word lave, the word heart, comes up so often in the vernacular of discussing our responsibilities to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how the feelings of the way we do things, the feelings in general of how we look at Hashem are critical. And that's why he says, Rabbeinu Bachai says that the Torah begins with a beis and ends with a lamed, and even though it's backwards, there really is no forwards and backwards in Torah. And he says that those two letters spell out lave, because essentially what the Torah wants is our heart. The Torah wants a relationship between us and God. Now, having said that, that's beautiful and it's nice. It sounds really nice, but the question is really, how do we do it? And if we're not feeling it, and if we're whatever reason we're sort of not there, so I just want to sort of go through two strategies of what we can do during this time of the year, and really any time of the year, in trying to develop our relationship and think about that God is really a very important part of my life. And what can I do to sort of show that? What can I do to sort of kickstart that relationship fresh and new? And once you have it, and once you really we feel it, and again, sometimes people say, well, I've had too many challenges, and God's sort of not on my side right now. What you really notice about these situations, and we should never ever be challenged in any serious fashion. We pray every single day that God, don't challenge us. But it's really fascinating to me that you see sometimes, and sometimes, more often than not, you see special people who are challenged in a very, very serious way. And one that you would have thought would have maybe totally derailed this individual into a totally different direction, yet they have those challenges be a catalyst to even deepen their relationship with God, to enhance it and to further entrench it, as opposed to sort of saying, hey, what are you doing to me? And this is not fair. What I do to deserve this? They use the challenges as a way of sort of saying, I'm going to sort of use this as a tool to deepen my relationship with God. And so I think it's really not about what position we're in. It's not about whether things are rolling for us great right now or whether they're not. If anything, one can argue that when things aren't so good, if we can really get down to basics and reestablish what's really important to us in life, that would allow us probably to deal with those challenges in a much more successful way. Where instead of feeling isolated, feeling alone, feeling disconnected, our attitude would be, no, we can get through this. And me and God we're gonna work together to make it happen. So I want to start with this, one basic strategy, and not to say that if one doesn't work, let's use the other one. They both are important, and but certainly they don't have to work together. They can work individually, and I think they're both very significant. The first, I think, a strategy we can use is just to simply stop and reflect on even the smallest things in life, to appreciate what God does for us. And it does sometimes take a paradigm shift, because the truth of the matter is very often I deal with high school kids mostly, and high school kids are in a mode where, it's very much into me, self-gratification, and what I want and what I need, what I don't have. So, it's sometimes very hard. One of the great challenges of a teenager is davening. From teenager, religious boy or girl going through the teenage years, it's hard to really get into prayer, because prayer seems to be about praying to God about what I want, and when I don't get it, what's it all about? And really, that's not really what prayer should be. I mean, prayer gives us an opportunity to pray for things that we need, but it's really much more about recognizing the incredible gift of life that God has given us. So if we sort of slow down life and try to really reflect on all of the kindnesses, in the small ones, the big ones, the historical ones, the immediate ones, the ones that seem maybe almost insignificant, but if we start thinking in those terms, that all the little things that happen to us are coming directly from God in His loving kindness, in His infinite capacity to really take care of us, that would, I think, be a tremendous help. We say, because of the time of the year, we say a special psalm of Tillim at this time of year twice a day, Mizmor L'Dovid Hashem Or V'Yishi. So we say that psalm twice a day, and in that psalm, Psalm 27, in Tehillim, in that psalm, it talks about the fact that David HaMelech is saying, Aviv v'imi azavuni v'Hashem yasfeni. My mother and father have forsaken me, and God, you've taken me in. So what does he mean? He didn't have a good mother and father. David HaMelech was complaining about the parenting home that he grew up in. It's like, what does he really mean? So I saw Rashi. Rashi says an absolutely incredible thing. And it almost makes you blush a little bit when you hear what Rashi says, but it opens up our eyes a little bit into the capacity we have and the responsibility we have to recognize God's involvement in our lives in the most subtlest of details. What does he say? What does that mean? Rashi says, the great famous commentator Rashi, he says what it means is, when my parents conceived me, that's what David HaMelech is saying. What David HaMelech is saying is, when my parents conceived me, that group of chromosomes and cells that ended up becoming me, who thought about it, who cared about it, who nurtured it? When the act of relations between my mother and my father were done, they all sort of turned their own way and went to sleep. They didn't sit there and focus on this group of molecules, this group of cells that were somehow going to turn into David HaMelech. They went to sleep. They did what they did. They got their wonderful, pleasurable moment out of it, but they sort of went on their lives. Who really nurtured me? Who allowed me to become me? It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu, okay, who allowed the fertilization of those cells to become David HaMelech. And that's what he means, Hashem Yasfeni, Hashem gathered me in. And my parents really, at that point, really, I wouldn't say couldn't care less, but that wasn't really on their minds. It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu who made sure I became who I became. What a fascinating visualization. I mean, you'd say, like, who thinks in these terms? Who would have even imagined that? That's something you should ask. Say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, say to God, I thank you so much. I love you for how you nurtured me, how you've taken care of me. You thank him for the big things. You were in trouble once. You got bailed out. David HaMelech had many trials and tribulations, and many times that he was in a very tight spot. Okay, I get those, but here he's recounting his life, thinking about the incredible kindnesses that he received from God. And what are you talking about? He's talking about the fact that when my parents had relations and I was conceived, they sort of just rolled over and went to sleep, and they didn't really give much thought to me. Well, is that really a complaint? I don't think it was a complaint. I don't think the point is that David is complaining about his parents. David is saying, look how far God's love extends. And how the smallest little tipa, this little drop of semen that seems so insignificant, God watched it and nurtured it and protected it and allowed it to become King David. Now, sort of, if we stop and think that this is how we sort of live our lives, if we can really stop and reflect for the little kindnesses, the small things that happen, they happen every single day. If we can somehow, before we even get into the details of life and to get into the obligations that we have on a regular basis of being a good Jew, but just start reflecting on these small kindnesses, I think it would change who we are. And again, these are not simple things. It requires the number one requirement of what Rosh HaShanah demands of a Jew, and that is to get out of ourselves, to get into a mode of, I'm not living for myself. It's not about me. It's about God. It's about the Jewish people. It's about a world that I envision, that I pray for, of everyone recognizing the exalted nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God Himself. That's really what the prayers are essentially about. Rosh HaShanah is an incredible holiday where it does not focus on sin at all, because it's not about sin. Sin is about me. Sin is about my problems and my issues and my desire to become better. Slow down. It's almost like Rosh HaShanah is saying, this is the time that God wants your heart. God wants you to be committed, to be thoughtful, to be humble, and to reshape the relationship of how you live your life and bring me into it, which in a sense pushes your ego out of it. Can you remove your ego and replace it with godliness? Can you do that? So this idea of looking at the small day-to-day kindnesses, the small things that, whatever. I mean, I'm sure if we stopped and we reflect on a daily basis, the accent that we just, that we just didn't get into, or this appointment that I thought was going to be late, but something just opened up. There's so many little things that happen that are meaningful and make a difference to us on a daily basis. And if we slow things down and reflect and think about, wow, this is Hashem letting me know He's here. This is about Hashem letting me know He loves me and He's taking care of me. And I got it. I recognize it, and I constantly reinforce it. So I think that is one wonderful way of developing Hakaras Hatov. Gratitude is an incredibly important fundamental principle in life. If we're not able to develop gratitude for people, if we're not able to thank people for the things that they do, even the Egyptians, we're not allowed to inflict any harm on the Egyptians, because we have to develop and have a sense of gratitude to Egypt enslaved us. Egypt tortured us. Egypt actually even killed us to a large degree, and we have to have gratitude. Well, yeah, because at the same time they did offer us. We were there, and we stayed in their country, and we had housing. This is not to say that therefore that there aren't issues that God will have with Egypt. God will take care of those issues. God has His way of running the world. But as far as how do I feel, if I receive something good from somebody or some nation, I have to recognize it, and I have to feel it. And it's something that we very often don't want to acknowledge because we don't like to feel indebted to people. And again, that's a quality that we should not be embracing. We should feel absolutely the idea of thank you and the idea of you've made such a difference in my life. That quality that we are able to hopefully express to people, that we have to extrapolate over to God as well. And it's something that runs through the Torah in so many different ways, the idea of Hakaras Hatov, recognizing the good. So there's the micro good and the macro good. So David HaMelech's focus on God nurturing and babying that embryo, that not even fetus, the semen that developed into that fetus, is really reminding us about the small things. But then you also have the big things, which we can easily forget. This very parsha, Kisavo, the next week's reading is Parshas Kisavo. And at the very beginning of the parsha, we talk about Bikurim, the mitzvah of Bikurim. We bring our fruits to Jerusalem, we give them to the Kohen, we go through a beautiful ceremony. And what do we say? Arami Ovid Ovid. Actually, we read it in the Haggadah as well. On Pesach night, we read in Haggadah. Arami Ovid Ovid. Arami Ovid Ovid. We're talking about the Jewish people throughout all of the centuries in Israel. And when we bring our fruits, we say Arami Ovid Ovi. Arami Ovid Ovi is referring to Lavan, who wanted to kill Yaakov Avinu. Well, we're going back hundreds of years, and we said, he wanted to destroy Yaakov. Who bikesh laker sakol. That God says, but you came along and you protected us, you saved us. So I'm bringing fruits 500 years into the Jewish history books of being in Israel, and my obligation is to start recalling events of hundreds of years ago. Like, what's the deal with that? And again, it opens up our eyes to the way a Jew needs to think. That we are not here in a vacuum. We are here as part of a destiny and part of a connection to a much greater force, a much greater entity called the Jewish people. And we are a link in an absolutely incredible, fantastic chain of history and of destiny that we are here. We might be, it looks like a nice little room with a number of people sitting here in the link kollel, but there's a link, okay, that's way bigger than just this kollel. That link that we are forging is together with the history of the Jewish people and the destiny of the Jewish people. And that's why we say Arami Ovid Ovi, because we have to be cognizant of that fact. Who are we? We started not right now where I was born. We're not here just in Los Angeles. There is a whole incredible element to the existence of the Jewish people that defies logic. And so much so that the truth of the matter is, of Yaakov Emden, there's a very famous, great rabbinic author, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who wrote the very famous statement that very often is quoted, that he writes, and he wrote this about 250, 300 years ago, and he says, Chei nafshi, he says, I swear on my life, Now, greater than the miracle of the splitting of the sea, which we all, oh my God, right? Who doesn't? I hear it all the time. Oh, if I wouldn't have been there, it's believing God would be easy. If I would have saw the sea split, if I would be there with the all the plagues, that's one thing. But I don't see any miracles every day. Sun comes up, the sun goes down. We go through life. Where are the open miracles? Well, Yaakov Edmond says, you want open miracles? The most fantastic miracle of all time, he says, is the miracle of Jewish survival. So we do see miracles. He wrote that 300 years ago. He said it is inexplicable how a nation could have been thrown from one end of the world to the other and totally dominated and annihilated and crushed on so many different levels, yet we're here and we're still dynamic. And can you imagine if he had seen the last 300 years of Jewish history? What did the world say about the Jewish people in 1945? If somebody would have told you that 74 years later, this would be the situation of the Jewish people, that there are more Jews learning Torah, there are more religious Jews, Israel is a dynamic force on the international scene of unimaginable levels of force, economically and technologically and militarily. I mean, there's just and the learning that's going on. You say it's impossible. What are you talking about? Look at the Jewish people. They're nothing. They just 6 million just wiped out. Look at them. You're talking about a dynamic force just 70 years from now? You'd say it can't be, and yet we're seeing it. So on that level, on the macro level, there's also so much to be thankful for. There's so much to sort of be inspired by. There's so much to sort of say the wow factor of, look at me, a member of the Jewish people, being the recipient of such incredible kindness, that we're here. I mean, we all have our stories. I'm sure each and every one of us can write an incredible book just from the 3 to 4 generations, including us and backwards. I'm sure there are, it's almost an unbelievable story. Miracles every which way in our own lives that we could look to say, my gosh, have I not seen the hand of God so obviously in my life? It would be possible. So to not see it. So I think on the micro and the macro level, these are two wonderful constant focuses we have to have. Things would be very different. Our excitement about being a Jew, our readiness to do mitzvot, to take on that extra challenge, to push ourselves to maybe be a little bit better. It'd be a lot easier if we'd have this almost love affair with God that comes from recognizing how much He loves us. And that, because there's no other way to love God. It's just not possible. We can talk about, His grace, His power, and His might, and He made the universe, and these are all overwhelming thoughts about the brilliance of the universe. And just the miracle itself. I just was recently saw one of those 5-minute Prager University videos, and the guy was talking about the greatest miracle of them all is the miracle of the existence of the universe. There's so many factors running against it. The mathematical probability or lack of probability of there being a universe is just not imaginable. And it itself is the greatest proof to the fact that there was intelligent design and creation. Without getting into all the details of that. But it's a nice video if you want to look at it. I'm sure you can find it on PragerU. But so the point being that there's so much to see and so much to be inspired by and so much to sort of, really feel I want to give God my heart. Because hearts cannot be given without emotion, without appreciation, without recognition. And it's this kind of focus that allows us to really throw ourselves in. To sort of, and to, think back at that question that man, in eulogizing his wife and coming to recognize what's really important. And because, he wasn't very clear about what he meant, but I can imagine that all the challenges of, what you go through when you're dealing with this horrific tragedy of slowly seeing a spouse pass away, well before, I guess, whatever, we think our time is, but certainly well before, reasonable time expectation of a person in this world. And it sort of forces you to come to grips, with what you really prioritize. What do you really want? And what do you believe? And what do you really feel? So emotions are critical here. We don't always think of Orthodoxy as a religion of emotion because there's so many details. We can't let that deter us. We can't let that fool us. It's a mirage. And the people who just get caught up in the details and lose sight of the emotion and of the passion and of the connection that we have to have with God, they're missing it. They're really, and I know it sounds a little harsh, but I'm not here to judge how God looks at that type of service which is robotic in nature and lacking thought and depth and understanding of what I do and why am I doing what I'm doing. I'm not here to judge how God looks at it, but it is very, very clear when you analyze what the Torah wants from us and what the Rishonim, the great commentators, say that we have to give to God in our service. The heart's got to be there, and the heart's got to be there first. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying, well, if my heart's not there, I shouldn't do it. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that if we can get our heart into that relationship and have that feeling, then we are so much ahead of the game and everything else will make so much more sense. So that's one type of strategy that I wanted to talk about tonight. Then there's another part. Because even if we can't do this, I can't do it. I don't know, my heart's not there, and I'm just not in the mood, and I just, maybe another time, but not this year, not this Rosh HaShanah. No, it's not going to happen. Okay, listen, we're all in different places, and we all have different challenges. And this is, the beauty of this is this can happen today. It could have happened 5 years ago. It can happen in 50 years. It can happen one day before the end of a person's life where their heart gets sort of touched and they can reconnect to God in such a meaningful way where literally they can be catapulted to the highest levels in literally seconds. But so it's not about it's got to be now or never. But it is important. Something that's definitely very important. But there's a second. Might be easier. I'm not sure whether it's easier or not, but it's certainly very different. I can see a person who might say about Path A, it's not going to work right now. Path B might work pretty nicely, and that's pretty powerful too. And it's a very different track that sort of gets us into God through a different mechanism. Because a few weeks ago, we read a very, very important pasuk in the Torah. And the pasuk says, Banim atem Hashem lekechem. You are God's children. All of you. Banim atem. This is God talking to us. You are God's children. You're my children. Now, many Rishonim in the Mesus Sharm, who wasn't a Rishon, but certainly he was one of the great Musar masters and wrote the classic work Mesil Sharm, says towards the end of the book, he speaks about the fact of what's really important in God's eyes about Jews. What can you do that would really, in a sense, impress God? So, and he says, if God is calling us his children, then what God is saying to us, I want you to understand and think about it. We also say, starting soon, once Rosh HaShanah hits, we're going to say Avinu Malkeinu. That's one of the main prayers we say, the highlight prayers of the service of the 10 days between Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur is Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu, he's our father. We're his kid. We're his children. So what is the hallmark of a parent? If we are his children, he's our parent. And we see that metaphor many other places, that there are three parents, in a sense, to every Jew, to every human being, actually. The mother, the father, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and God. So he is technically, and I guess that's very telling about David HaMelech's point. David HaMelech was saying, my parents turned away and rolled over and went to sleep, and who was that third parent that actually took care of that of that semen to make sure it became that incredible David HaMelech? It was God. So that's the third parent working overtime, making sure that everything comes out right. So what is it about parents? Let's look at parents, says the Ramchal, says the Mesil Sharm. There is really almost nothing, or no one, I should say, that a parent loves more than somebody who takes care of the children, right? So I don't think there are that many parents in the room. Okay, just right now, probably two, if my guess is right. Okay, so it might be hard for you to relate to this, but I think any parent would relate to this. I know it gets very emotional when you think about it, but every parent, I think, would relate to this very powerfully. To the point where maybe we might like once in a while to hear Lashon Hara. Maybe it seems juicy. We should never hear it. It's against halach. It's definitely not a good thing. But sometimes it's very hard. You got to, somebody's about to tell you a juicy piece of Lashon Hara, of gossip. Yeah, tell me. I'm curious. What's going on. You try telling Lashon Hara about somebody who takes care of somebody's kids, who's really good to their children, who when their children needed, they were in a pinch, and that individual bailed out that child. Lashon Hara about that person. Keep it away from me. Please close your mouth. I don't want to hear a word. That person you want to tell me about? That person you want to bring down? No way. That person took care of my kids. that person is all good. That person is fantastic. When my children needed something, that person was there for them. End of story. So that's the way we are. As parents, we are so protective of our children that if somebody's out there taking care of my children, numero uno. That's it. So the Ramchal says to us an incredible thing. You want to find favor in God's eyes. You want to develop a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe, I don't know, the heart right now is not in a great place, and maybe you just sort of can't muster that sort of spiritual focus about thinking about all the divine, incredible interventions of God, macro, micro. These are all nice, but I don't know. I'm just not there right now. Okay. But can you love people? Can you take care of your brothers and sisters in Klal Yisrael? Can you extend yourself? Because a lot of people can't get into that, but they can get into this. They can get into maybe extending themselves, maybe a little bit more than typical, to make sure that another Jew is taken care of. And not to say Jews and nobody else, but we're family, right? The Torah does say family before everybody else. So the Jewish people are one family. You want to be nice to the rest of the world? That's a beautiful thing as well. But family does come first. And if we can take care of our family, then that's something that, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, wow, that Jew's a special Jew. It explains, I think, very much why the Gemara in Tainus, very famous Gemara about a rabbi meets Eliyahu Hanavi in the marketplace, and he says, who in this incredibly busy marketplace, similar to Fifth Avenue during, the busy season in December, literally wall-to-wall people. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Manhattan there, but it's wall-to-wall people, till like late at night, literally, you can't budge, you can't move. So, and who in this vast marketplace is going to the world to come? Who in this vast marketplace is going to merit the world to come? And 2 different days, the Eliyahu Hanavi, the great prophet Elijah, who he didn't know, he didn't know, but he asked him, so tell me, once I have you and I have the merit to see you, to answer my question, you are the prophet, you know. So 2 different days he points, one day he points to one person, the other day he points to 2 people. And who did he point to? What, some great Rosh HaYeshiva who learns 20 hours a day and gives shurim to the whole world? He's on Torah anytime, with thousands of different tapes. Interesting. No, it's not who he pointed to. I'm not Chas v'Shalom putting that down. But notice that's not what he focused on. Maybe the message is you don't have to be that guy to get into Olam Haba, or be that amazing lady who's the Rebbetzin of the whole world and they're writing books about you, and like everyone is just sort of clamoring to emulate you and to get a bracha from you. Well, that's beautiful. That's not in any way to be diminished. But he pointed to regular people who really weren't regular people. 2 people he pointed to one day who are bat chanim. They were like sort of comics. They put a smile on people's faces. Because he went over to them. He says, what do you do? He says, what do I do? I'm a batchin. That means I look for people who were down, and I look to pick them up. I look to put a smile on their face. Like, whoa, like that's a bet olam haba. That's who he pointed to. The other day, he points to a fellow who the Gemara says literally looked like a gang member. He was dressed like the dregs of society. And like he was really surprised, like, this guy, Hanavi is saying this guy's going to Olam Haba. So what do? Well, I hang out with the dregs of society. And because these dregs capture Jewish women, and they put them in jail, and they hold them for ransom, and I make sure that nobody lays a finger on them till they get the money. Because if I wasn't there, they would abuse these ladies and would attack them. And take advantage of them. So I become their buddies to make sure that I can't stop them from holding them ransom, but I can stop them from putting a finger on them. And therefore I protect the dignity of Jewish women. So like, here's a guy not dressed apart, but he's sticking his neck out, in the lowest areas of life, but to do the most incredibly noble and sublime endeavor of protecting Jewish women. It's like, that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a special connection to that person, and I'm not sure if necessarily, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that person had the greatest connection to God, but it's almost like the Mesilas Yesharim says, you're taking care of my kids. I love you. I just love you. You're taking care of my children, and therefore, if we can do both, obviously it's great. But if we can't get in the door the first way, if we get in the door the second way, if we sort of live our lives about the idea of it's not about me, because both of these qualities demand a common thread. And that is getting ourselves and our needs and our ego and our self-centeredness and our, basically self-aggrandizement completely out the window. Chuck it out the window. The last thing that we need coming to Rosh HaShanah is any ego coming into that room. Okay, we've got to leave it at the door and get into a mindset where it's not about me, and it's about either God and my recognition of how amazing He is, how much I love Him, and how much I'm completely ready to be subservient to Him in my commitment to Him and my love for Him, and therefore I'm ready to totally acknowledge Him as King of the world, which is what Rosh Hashanah is about. Or if I can't do that, I'm ready to leave my ego at the door and say I'm completely committed to the Jewish people, and I'll do whatever I can to help my brothers and sisters. And when they need me, and I can be that shoulder for them to cry on, or that person to protect them in jail, or the person to put a smile on their face, or that person to basically just help out in need. And money is great. Sometimes money is what really we need, but more often than not, it's not about the money. It's just about the way we are able to be there for people in times that they're looking to us for that support. And if you can do that, you've enshrined yourself in a very special place. And again, we can't judge. Well, I do this. I'm this lover of the Jewish people. I do so much but I don't do this and I don't do that. So is that okay? We're not here to say what's okay, what's not okay. Yeah, certainly, I can't. I'm not in that position. That's really God's domain. But we do know one thing that definitely gives us an incredible connection by caring about His children to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So much so, it gives us another dimension. The famous Baal Musar, the Koch Vayar Bitzela, one of the great Bali Musar, one of the students of Yisrael Salanter in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He says, there's a pasuk we're going to read in a couple of weeks, that God is perfect. Okay, He does justice. He says, Kel Amuna Ve'navel. God is trustworthy and there's no iniquity in God's work. So he explains what that means in a very fascinating way. Well, of course, there's no iniquity with God. Like, what's the point? He says, well, what this pasuk is saying is something very fascinating, very incredible. And again, we should take this thought with us first of our lives, because it really, I think it's a great motivator. And he says, when a king gives out punishment, or capital punishment, somebody does a heinous crime and he spends the rest of his life in jail, or gets a death sentence and capital punishment, whatever it might be, that is justice, right? Guilty, testimony, justice. Well, is it really justice? What did the wife do? What did the kids do? What about all the people who relied on him? What did they do? Okay, so what's a judge going to say back to all the people who say, "Oh, it's not fair. What do you mean? I relied on this guy. He had to pay me back, and he's been doing this for me." And sorry, I'm sorry. This guy should have thought about that before he did his terrible crime. You do the crime, you do the time. Sorry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not like that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a regular king. He's not a regular judge. He doesn't go by the typical justice system. When God metes out justice and judgment and punishment, if we're going to use that word, okay, although we don't really know what's punishment and what's something else, but we might not like it, even though it might not be punishment. But when God metes it out, every single person who's impacted is part of God's calculation. That had to happen. You needed that. Whether it's the husband, the wife, the child, the parent, whatever it may be, it all fits into a perfect mosaic and tapestry of justice. And everybody gets exactly what they need and what they deserve, I guess. Again, it's maybe too harsh a word, but what they really need in terms of, the challenge that really they have to find. But what happens if somebody doesn't deserve that? Let's say somebody doesn't, it's not coming their way, that particular situation would not warrant this particular child, or this particular individual from sort of having that challenge before them, and God's going to find another way. Kela Muna Vein Avel, the more people that need you, the more people that connect to you, the more people that rely on you, it's sort of, in a sense, buying yourself possibly, and this is what Rebitzler says, more time. Because if so many people need you, then you've become necessary. and God, and you're more indispensable than somebody else who can vanish from the face of the earth, and no one would say boo. This other person vanishes from the face of the earth. Oh, no, it does not now. I can't. It doesn't justify it. Look at the hundreds of people, the thousands of people are impacted by this person. That person's got to stick around. So, again, I'm not saying this formula will be, understandable in every scenario that we'll get it. But clearly, this is part of God's rationale that I cannot inflict sort of indiscriminate and unjustified punishment on people that don't deserve it. So the more we are impactful in the lives of people around us, the more necessary we are in this world. The more HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a sense, we're buying time to get ourselves together and to become closer to God and to become better Jews. So these are two incredible avenues, both really, in a sense, very independent from each other. Again, if we can do both, if we can sort of recognize how amazing God is, and maybe I'm motivated. In other words, the greatest motivation to help God's children is because of how much we love God. Because think about it, the greatest motivator to take care of somebody's child, if you love the parent and therefore say, that parent has done so much to me, I'm therefore going to take care of his children, that's much greater than just, I know the child, and I'm going to take care of the child. It becomes a much greater reason to do what we need to do. So, as we approach Rosh HaShanah, we need to know that really God is listening, He's waiting, He is anxiously ready to grab us up and hold us by the hand and take any small step that we take and catapult it to an incredible leap of a very high level. It means so much to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we bother to think and bother to plan and bother to contemplate and bother to venture into a world of what can I do to become a better person? What can I do to become closer to Hashem? What can I do to make His world nicer and better for Him? All that is super significant. And B'ezras Hashem, if we can take these strategies to heart and work in both of these ways if possible, and we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we said, it's a very famous statement that the Bali Musa say that if we open up even the hole, the eye of a needle, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of really opens that up to a tremendous degree. Well, then hopefully HaKadosh Baruch Hu will certainly do that for all of us and for all of Klal Yisrael. And we're at a time that there's so much that we need. There's so much that Klal Yisrael needs. There's so many challenges that we face. If we can bring these emotions with us throughout Elul and into Rosh HaShanah and throughout the Aseret Mei Tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu hopefully will accept that tefillos, will bring an end to all the suffering in Klal Yisrael that really is challenging at this point right now. And hopefully we'll be zocheh to a good Geben Shor, a beautiful year of happiness, of health, of bracha v'atzlach, and we'll be zocheh to finally see the Bias HaMashiach Mehem Imenu.